As Gwent ages, the grace in which it accrues wisdom is not without its blemishes. Keeping up with turbulent expectations in the internet age is a fool's errand, and CDPR has made its fair share of fumbles along the path to where it currently stands. A truly unique card game occupying shark-infested waters. It is by no means a guppy in these dangerous tides, but it is relying on nimble maneuvering to stay on the survivor's side of the food chain. Over the years, Gwent has emerged from various states of development. Be it a closed beta, an open invitation, or an entire rework, the game has navigated difficult terrain to continuously chug along steadily. The concern for many, however, is how much gas it has left in the tank, and what is going to be the next big innovation or shakeup to ensure that Gwent can maintain momentum into 2022 and beyond. In the shadow of apex predators such as Hearthstone, Gwent truly is a different animal. Escaping the similar life total framework that other card games rely on as objectives, Gwent offers a different, and some might argue, acquired taste. It will never compete with the titans of the industry because it doesn't need to, nor does it really want to. It is different enough to maintain a player base who just don't jive with mana systems or minion combat. What it needs to do, however, is learn from the competition and take heed. Evolution is meant to weed out the weak, and adapting to the needs of an aging card game is a lesson that CDPR will have to heed from the big dogs in the pound. Alright, now, before criticism is hurled my way, I fully understand that a massive amount of CDPR's success has been by bucking trends and norms in the development of games. It has excelled on the basis of creativity, and that is an asset it should continue to lean on. What it needs to do, however, is an inevitability. Gwent needs a standard rotation, and it needs it soon. This is not a simple assessment of, well, everybody's doing it, so should we. This isn't pumpkin spice that seems to infect every consumable when October is around the corner. No. This is a viable strategy to manage the growing card pool and really alleviate design pitfalls that haunt development because certain cards just continue to exist and be legal in the competitive format. Standard rotation isn't a cop-out. It is often a necessity that is the consequence of a game's own success. Gwent has just launched the final leg of their Price of Power expansion. The final wave of cards are out, which brings their total card collection to 1,429 unique cards. All of these cards are currently legal in the only format that exists from a competitive perspective: ranked. That is an immense library of options and deserves kudos to the design team to have published that many, mostly, unique cards that usually can impact a game. To weigh this against the competition, Hearthstone introduced their standard rotation after their 5th full set expansion in 2016, Whispers of the Old Gods. Their card pool prior to when this kicked in was 606 cards, less than half of Gwent's arsenal. The introduction of standard format opened up new avenues for the game, revitalizing it and giving more latitude to develop. Gwent can absolutely benefit in the same ways. The initial reaction concerning the implementation of a standard format would usually dance to the tune of an outcry that the card pool becomes diminished. While this is objectively true, if you're cropping out a series of sets out of the competitive scene, obviously there are going to be less tools to work with to build the masterpieces that we then see at the various Masters tournaments. What should also be considered, however, is twofold. First, the creation of a standard format would consequently create a wild or legacy format. In other words, you're not taking away the opportunity to compete in an open card pool. You're merely putting more emphasis on the limited pool. Open tournaments, ladders, and rewards associated with them can always be curated and supported by CDPR, and the community for that matter. That can always exist. It can also give players an outlet to escape the grind of standard ladder and dive into a more murky type of water that is the open format. Second, this allows CDPR to open up design space on new cards that are currently hindered by existing cards. Certain cards that simply cannot be printed because other cards are already there, and their coexistence would shred the space-time continuum like an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. We have already seen how the collateral damage of certain cards splashes nerf shrapnel on unsuspecting victims. Some cards are already getting changed to support more severe transgressors, but how about the other cards that can't even escape the event horizon of a design meeting? I've done a few videos in the past exploring the abandoned designs of cards, and oftentimes the reasoning behind their getting left behind is simply because other existing cards would push them into the stratosphere of power levels. With a standard rotation, these cards can now come out to play with their devious counterparts rotated out. I asked Jason Slama about a year or so ago if standard rotation was on their radar, and the response I received was mixed. It surely was something that they were consciously aware of and have evaluated, but not as a future option of shaking things up. Their mission in designing expansion sets is to ensure that they can maintain a card ecosystem that is fruitful for every card, no matter when it was printed. They don't want to have to pull the chute on a standard format as an emergency tactic if the engines are on fire. Their approach is to finally maintain the system and avoid that as a course of action. Now, the engines may not be on fire, but there is some rattling in the fuselage. I'm not worried about the wings fall, but it is always nice to know that there are options out there in case you need to cry Mayday. This consideration of a standard format would certainly take a much deeper dive into the nitty-gritty of how it would pan out, what sets would rotate out, when they would rotate, and what cards would remain constant as a potential core set. My goal in this discussion is not necessarily to sort out the nuts and bolts of the mechanism, but rather to convince you that it isn't an outlandish idea as it may seem. In fact, it's quite inevitable. We may actually live in a world where Wolfpack is a viable card. Dream big, people.